infrastructure, Sewerage and Water Board. The mayor just appointed a team at $27,500 a week to manage the Sewerage and Water Board. The City Council has a Public Works Committee, as well as its charter responsibility as the utility or regulatory agent for the city. Rate increases, sewer and water, gas, and electric, as well as cable. In your role as City Council, what would the discussion have been like, knowing that the city was budgeted to clean 15,000 drains, and they only cleaned 1,500? And what type of accountability would you show in knowing that money had been appropriated to do storm drainage cleanups each year over the last several years, and that money had not been used? As well as, even though council members are not on the Sewage and Water Board anymore, that in the early part of the year, several $1 million were allocated to fix turbines and pumps, but contracts were never signed.
Well, first, I think you point at the very pertinent question, which is that there is a Public Works Committee that is supposed to meet, and that Public Works Committee has oversight directly of two things. Number one, catch basin maintenance, and also, as I understand it, Sewage and Water Board and Joint Sewage and Water Board and Department of Public Works projects. Let me say this about that. When Energy has a issue, they come to the City Council in March and they say, here's our work hardening plan for hurricane season. And there is a matrix that they walk through with the Utilities Committee to say, this is where we are strong. This is where we know we may have some problems during hurricane season. These are some things that we need to improve in the short and near term. Where is that for the Public Works Committee? And why aren't we doing the same thing for Sewage and Water Board? It really isn't that hard to ask, are our pumps operating? Are the turbines working effectively? Are the catch basins being cleaned? And having, as our Republican former president said, a trust but verify system to make sure that the work that's supposed to be done is actually getting done.
We let a bunch of people go, and some people left on their own. But it's something that we should have been in charge of. You know, as a city council, I think, you know, everybody's saying the mayor didn't do this, the mayor didn't do that. I think the city council as well didn't do their due diligence in the process. I think oversight is something that if we're charged to do, we should do. As far as cleaning catch basins, you know, you hear all these things about this machine didn't work, that machine didn't work, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. You know, one of the things I look at, and I see twice a week cleanup, you know, trash pickup. Well, I look at it and say, do we really need twice a week pickup all year? How about if we do once a year pickup during the cooler months when we're not having crawfish boils every weekend, and, you know, take these guys and have them clean the catch basins. You know, get them into the streets. They're public works workers. It's a little bit of cross and crafts, but really not. You know, I mean, it's a public work function. So I think if we really utilize all of our assets, we can get this done in a more efficient and oversight way.
What would I have done in reaction to this money not being spent? Well, it's just ungodly to me that this keeps happening to our city. I liken this to Hurricane Katrina. The Corps of Engineers requested $13 billion 5 years before Hurricane Katrina. We didn't get the funding from Congress. 5 years later, Katrina hit. It's been 12 years since Katrina. We still don't have levee protection up to a Category 5, and we just had a Category 4 in the Gulf. The same thing is happening with our Sewage and Water Board. We don't have a plan. We desperately need one. We need subject matter experts from around the world to come here and help lead us down the path of having a successful plan that we can follow verbatim without having to depend on the leadership that doesn't have the knowledge.
If I was sitting on the council during this time, the first thought in my mind would be, this is truly the straw that broke the camel back. Everybody should be tired of it. I know definitely, even for me as just a regular citizen, this is truly the twig that is breaking my back totally. I was in the flood. My children were stuck at De La Salle, and I was too far away to even get them. So this charter says that we have the power to demand stuff happens. And I just think that the city council lost their identity. Everything that's said is about what the mayor wants. When you know in real terms, in real life, this is what we need for the city. Nobody wants to come outside their house after 30 minutes of rain and be flooded. Nobody. I know I don't. And enough is enough.
So, Sewerage and Water Board is an all-out mess. I think we realize that. Of course, don't fool yourself into thinking it's the only part of local government that's an all-out mess, but it's every day it seems to be worse and worse. But here's the thing. We would be a room full of willful fools if we were to buy into the idea that the Sewerage and Water Board was responsible for that flood. The Sewerage and Water Board wasn't. The Sewerage and Water Board doesn't even have under its responsibilities catch basins. The city does. Public Works, run by the mayor, regulated by the council. They know every year what gets spent and what does not get spent. And the fact is, though, they chose not to do their job. It's called malfeasance. It's a criminal offense. Right here you have, this is a Mardi Gras de Bloom. It says Elks 1971. It's on the very bottom of a catch basin I cleaned out on my street. 46 years. That means that not only did Mitch not bother to clean catch basins, but neither did his dad and every mayor in between. And so that's all there. They all knew it, and that's whose fault this is, and this is where the accountability has to go.
There's some misinformation going around, because I want to be absolutely clear that the Sewage and Water Board is a state-created entity. Under the state statute, they absolutely do have the authority over the catch basins. They were cleaning the catch basins until the funding ran out when a drainage millage was not renewed in the 1990s, at which time the city overtook the catch basin cleaning under the Department of Public Works. And I also want to point out that the accountability on the Sewage and Water Board was by the virtue of 3 city council members being on that board. My opponent, Joe Giarrusso, sat on the board of the Bureau of Governmental Research with the mayor and the Bureau of Governmental Research and other groups, with great opposition, including the Office of Inspector General, opposed removing. The previous council voted to have a charter amendment, and the state legislature changed the Sewage and Water Board's governance structure to remove the accountability and oversight by the city council. And so when you say that there is no oversight and that the city council had budgetary oversight, they absolutely did not. It's set by state statute. There are benchmarks that they have to follow, not including operations and funding. So let's get the truth out there, and you can read the law yourself and read the reports where Bureau of Governmental Research recommended a 10-year rate increase and the governance reforms all at the same time. So let's just be truthful here about what's going on with the Sewage and Water Board.
You know, we also hear that the city's traditional focus on getting water out as quickly as possible is going to contribute to our flooding problem in the long term because of soil subsidence. So how do we balance these two things? How do we you know, run a functional drainage system, but keep in mind that in the long term, you know, we might have to live with water.
Living with water is something everybody does around the world. I mean, you look at the Netherlands and Amsterdam and areas in the northern Europe. You know, they have engineers. Years ago, I was at a seminar, and somebody asked a question of a Dutch engineer, and he said, "How do you guys keep this operating? How do you guys keep this water flowing in and out? You know, you have all this water pooled up everywhere, yet you're not flooding. And he made the comment, and he said, well, we build our levees to withstand a category 6. And the guy says, the guy was Max Webster, the head of the National Hurricane Center. He says, forgive me my ignorance, Professor, I've been doing this a long time, I've never heard of a category 6. He says, exactly. So in other words, they build it to big, then it's bigger than it can be. So what we really need to do, we really need to embrace this water. We need to learn how to live with it. We need to bring these engineers that are begging us to bring them in and teach us how to live with this water, maintain it and keep it running, and in the same time, pump it out when we need to pump it out.
The first thing I'll say is a reiteration of what I said before. The Corps of Engineers spent countless hours, days, nights, working to develop the Coastal 2050 plan, the feasibility study for a 50-year restoration of the coast as well as the flood walls. That did not get funded by Congress. All of that work with engineers who knew what they were doing did not get funded. We're going to go through the same thing if the people don't get behind the plan. The reason the people aren't getting behind the plans is because there is no plan to get behind, first of all. And secondly, because when there are meetings going on, the people aren't normally invited to those meetings. They're usually behind closed doors. I believe that in order for us to live with water, we need for our local leaders in the engineering sector, like Wagner and Ball Architects, for instance, to teach us what it takes to get it done and educate the people, not just the politicians.
2 words: intentionally proactive. We're doing the work ourselves anyway. We're cleaning our own catch basins. We're making sure that every sewer around our house is clean. So we just have to continue to be intentionally proactive in all situations, because if we're saying that we're gonna live with water, we need to at least know how to protect ourselves when it comes. So one thing is to be proactive and just make sure that our drainages are clean and we're doing what it takes to keep them clean, and the water that can be filtered out will be filtered out through those means.
If you go on Google Books, you can find lots of old documents from New Orleans, and you can find the original design documents for our drainage system. And they're worth reading, because one thing they point out in them is that the drainage system here was never intended to get all of the water out. There's a myth kind of that it was really designed to drain the city for things, but that was only part of it too. The fact is though, the drainage system was actually intended to design and explicitly specified as getting some water out, but keeping most water in and retaining it into the soils. It's specified that certain things have to never go away, like the New Basin Canal and the Carondelet Canal. Those did go away. And we have the system designed by that spec that says it has to be there for it to work. The system that was designed in the 1890s specified permeable pavement. It specified retention of green space. It specified keeping water in the city. We've always not followed the plan, and it's a choice. And so we have to choose to simply follow the plan.
This is an excerpt from the New Orleans Urban Water Plan. A lot of money went into creating this, and it's not being fully implemented. There's been some progress. We have a stormwater management amendment to the comprehensive zoning ordinance, but there are also tweaks that need to be made to that. What I recommended, I went and spoke at the council's special committee, special meeting on August 8th to talk about the stormwater management issues, is that, water does not respect boundaries. We really need to be working with, in a regional way. We have the Regional Planning Commission for Transportation. We should have one for stormwater management. We should be working across the parishes to take advantage of the federal funding that was put in place by Senator Mary Landrieu, the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act funds that are meant for coastal restoration and stormwater management, And that's going to take a regional approach and that's going to help address some of the drainage issues. It's going to address street surfaces. And all of these ideas are great, but they need funding, and that is a great source that we're not taking advantage of.
So there's two prongs to this. One is I think we need to make sure that we're looking for best practices from around the country and then also right next door. In Jefferson Parish, one of the things that they've done is actually flooding some of their parks to avoid flooding neighborhoods. I'd much rather see a park get flooded for a couple of days than one person have an inch of water in their house or their car. The second thing that both Aylin and Drew alluded to is also correct. We've had a lot of work with the urban water plan, and that involves a number of different pieces. That plan talks specifically about how to get federal money here in New Orleans to live with water and to retain water. And we know that there's a pilot program going on in Chantilly for about $141 million to help with that water retention, but that isn't being done yet. One of the other things the Urban Water Plan talks about is not only the Lafitte Greenway, I see somebody wearing a t-shirt, but also Lafitte Blueway, where water is retained alongside, so that way it's maintained here in the city. Of course, that is going to call for looking for federal funds from as many places as possible.
We have a lot of green space in District A, but we've also had a lot of controversies over the use of that green space in District A over the last couple of council terms. We can think of the golf course at City Park. We can think of the use of the fly at Audubon Park, and we have a new resource in the Lafitte Greenway as well. How would you protect our green spaces in New Orleans? And would you support the use of a single agency instead of so many different commissions and departments over each of these different entities? Thanks. I think we're with Mr. Green. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hardy first.
Yes, I'd like to, one, make certain that we prioritize our green space, our parks, particularly play space for our youth. I was at the city council meeting fighting against the Carrollton Boosters soccer stadium along the river, specifically because I believe that there aren't enough recreational opportunities for the young people who live in our district but cannot afford to pay for them. Also, I would like to follow Austin's lead in developing legislation around protecting our trees and indigenous plants. Right now, there's just too many trees being brought down, and I don't believe that people understand how our trees play a part in protecting us from water as well.
I agree with the green space. Actually, I was totally impressed with the Lafitte Greenway. I lived in the Lafitte Housing Project. So to see that come up like that was amazing. When I was younger, that didn't come close to existing. So I'm really impressed with that. But at the same time, the different areas that we need to surveillance and see what we can do to find more green spaces to keep and preserve the city as it is. We just need to actually have sagacious communication about it. I'm getting tongue-tied. Totally have communications about the different areas that we can use and keep as a green space.
A lot of people either have privilege or assess themselves the right to have privilege, and they really don't like being told no. And boy, did we make a lot of people mad a couple of years ago when 3,000 of us in Carrollton said no. And we stopped the soccer complex from not just going in, but going in on the very best, biggest prime spot of real estate. They weren't just going to do that, they were going to go ahead and fence off the other fields. It was going to be basically the wholesale privatization of our only place in this part of the city to go and have a picnic if you don't want to spend $1,000 a day for a shelter at Audubon. It was a fight. It was a fight that lasted months and months and months. And eventually it took back. I'm actually the guy who eventually killed it at the end by convincing their donors to yank their money out. It was Easter Sunday. I remember the conversations. And that's the only thing that finally killed it at the end. But the fact is, though, it took a huge crew. We fought But we shouldn't have had to fight because the park shouldn't be under Audubon, under City Park and all that stuff. It should be under the city's Parks Department. And the local area that serves the park, served by the park, should be the people who get to actually approve what goes on in the parks.
Well, parks are very important for many reasons. You know, it's a great place there are passive parks, there are active parks where you have recreational activities, and everyone can go there. They're open for everyone, whether you're poor or rich, for exercise, for health and fitness. And the way that we protect those parks is through zoning, through the master plan. And, you know, a lot of people worked on that Save Park, and I see some people in the room who worked on that as well. And I think that, you know, the way that the boards and different parks have been structured over time has provided, you know, quite a bit of funding for those parks that we may not see them in the state that they are. But, you know, I would be open to looking at how we structure them and how we collect taxes on them. You know, we have to be able to look at everything in a holistic way.
I think there are a couple of components here. First of all, you have to look again at the master plan, which has the force of law. And at least I know insofar as City Park is concerned, there's parts of City Park that can be used for development, and there's parts that's supposed to remain absolutely pristine. And I was driven home at a Parkview meeting where somebody was advocating solely for green space, and then somebody raised their hand and said, well, what about the Children's Museum that's going in? So there has to be a delicate balance based on, I think, the amount of land that you have, how the land is designed, and what it is used for. The land to fly is much smaller than the footprint of what you have at City Park. And certainly the second piece of this is you want neighborhood input into what's going into the parks as well. People have to be able to participate in the process, make sure that their feelings are being heard. And I think one thing you'll get all of us to agree on is less bureaucracy is better. So making sure that you have uniform rules while at the same time having the rules that apply to the different parks, their specifications, and the laws that apply to each one.
I grew up poor to middle class, and the parks were my gym, they were my hockey rink, they were my baseball field. I was able to go to these parks because I had a ball and a glove or a pair of skates, and I didn't need to pay for rent fees, I didn't need to pay to you know, be part of a process. It's very important for us to make sure we keep this in focus, because some of these kids can't get to Audubon, some of these kids can't get to City Park. There are parks sprinkled all around the city that we really need to keep a focus on, because they're the link to the other parks. As far as, you know, bringing them under one umbrella, yeah, sure, if we can do it efficiently, that's absolutely something we should be able to do. But as far as maintaining our green spaces, if we don't, we're in trouble, because green spaces lend a lot more than just recreational and social activity. Environmentally, you know, economically, it has so much impact on an overall neighborhood. Tying communities together overall, we just really need to keep the focus on all of these parks.
City budget